Hi, I'm Ashley Brockington.
And I'm Kaya Stevens. Welcome to Queer Arts Now.
We're Blustockings.
That's right.
Blustockings is an amazing independent bookstore. It's right here in the Lower East Side. It's on Allen Street.
One of the first cooperative queer lesbian bookstores in the city, and they have reading venues all the time. And we are here because we are at the premiere of Kicked Out, which is an anthology/memoir of accounts of queer adults and youth talking about their experiences being kicked out of their homes or having to leave because of their queer identity.
Heavy stuff.
It's very heavy stuff.
Heavy stuff. Because up to now we've been at drag shows and cabaret, and being queer is awesome and glittery and sparkly and fun, but it's also tragic and depressing.
Or it can be.
We lived on Elm Street at the time. I remember running up the dirt driveway, past the rusty car that sat next to our house, and then up the wooden steps of the porch, when I collided with the step-parent who was controlling my mom and us boys as he rushed out of the house. That was when I experienced my first flight out of the nest. I found myself being tossed into the yard, a sudden sharp pain of blood gushing down my face, a lot of yelling, dirt, door slamming. The leaves all around me suddenly felt like spring for some reason, despite the orange and blood red of the fall season.
After Sylvia Rivera died, it was out of her wish on her deathbed that Reverend Pat opened the space that she was the director of the food pantry for, to open the space at night for homeless LGBTQ youth. It's been intense. See, I didn't realize until the past couple of years that when I started at Sylvia's place, I was only 22 years old.
Right, you're
serving a population,
yourself.
16 through 24. So I started putting all these pieces together, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have been running for so many years that I never stopped to realize that I was homeless. Dude, I was living out of my car. I was working all night long so that I could go to school the next day, get naps in my car, just to graduate from high school.
2006. How were you kicked out if they say it was for your own good? I have no proof it was because I was queer. They've denied it every time I asked, every conversation cum familial breakdown I've initiated since my discharge.
There were lots of reasons that I was an out-of-control youth in my family's perspective, and whether or not my gender and sexuality were part of that varies on who you ask.
Right.
My parents claim that they had no clue that this place was going to have its, extremely straight regimen. I had told my parents that I thought we needed some time apart, and so they'd sent me to stay with my uncle up in northern Idaho, my wonderful uncle, for a couple of days, and I was supposed to be going back home on a Tuesday morning, and I met my parents. They met us at the airport by my uncle, which was a little weird, and I saw the tickets and saw that the tickets said they were going to Salt Lake, which wasn't where home was, and I asked my mom about it, and she said, oh, it's just a layover, a little side trip, and then we're gonna go home. My layover was 7 months.
I suppose it's just a coincidence that 3 of the 4 people I found who were locked up with me there now identify as queer. I suppose it's just a coincidence that one of them is trans. I suppose it's just a coincidence that I was required to grow my hair out long there. I suppose it's just a coincidence that we were required to wear pink as a punishment. I suppose it's just a coincidence that my counselor, Dana, focused more of our weekly sessions on the page in my journal that I described to my girlfriend than she ever did on my cutting or my scars. I suppose it's just a coincidence that so much as a hug between 2 girls on the unit was punishable with weeks on investment. We were encouraged to spend time with the boys.
I earlier didn't identify so strongly with being homeless. It's interesting, being a performer and being an extrovert. I'm always I'm queer, I'm trans, low income, immigrant, all these things, but I didn't fully politicize myself for some reason when it came to being homeless or being kicked out. So this was a really big act for me personally. And I do this work every day when I did youth development, so it kind of helped me come full circle to create a collective with other people who have similar stories or who can at least hold space and really get what I'm getting at. I admit it. When I was hungry, I'd miss home. When I had too many hours of nothing and I got lonely, I'd wonder what it would be like if the world operated in reverse. If arroz y condules or pancit were the standard. If me and my wonderful partner, also Filipina, only heard our homeland tongues in the radio, in gay bars, in conversations of good investments and well-educated propriety. I'd want to giggle as white kids and rich folks feel upset about being shunned away as you people. I'd love that. I'd want to hear only kundimans on the radio station gracing me and my future partner's bed. I'd make the concerns of a brown tranny's lament to be catchy and powerful and priceless. It is. I know it is. It's always about your own survival, and you gotta do what you have to do. And if I'm not promoting it, but you know, if you have to go to church to have food in your system, if you have to buckle yourself a little bit, it's survival. But I feel like eventually you'll grow into yourself, right? Eventually, that's what queer people are. We find our chosen family. That's kind of like our job, our way of being. We find people to love us and hold us, and those people will come and they will find you, and when you have the spirit and the vigor to do so, you'll be able to collectively create with them and organize and love with them.
There is an epidemic of LGBTQ youth homelessness in the United States. We know that 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. In reality, that number is probably a lot higher because it's only touching on kids who are accessing services. So this is a huge issue for me personally. When I was kicked out at 17, I went looking for a book like this that had stories or ideas of how to make this work. I went to the library and I picked up every single book that I could find about queerness in general, and specifically queer youth. And you know, all I found, the only stories I was finding about youth were these stories where parents would be upset when their kid came out, and then, you know, there was like this sort of moment where their kid told them and they freaked out, and then by the end of it, it's this resolution where they're, you know, having their son's boyfriend for dinner, or they're baking cookies for their daughter's GSA, and these are all really great stories, and having those out in the world is important, but it looked nothing like my story, and it looked nothing like the stories of the folks that I knew, and at that point, not seeing those stories made me feel even more alone and even more abnormal in an environment where I didn't have other homeless youth around me. And so at that point I sort of made this promise that I was going to create this book if I made it through.